Hey, I'm Mel.
And I'm Andres, and you're listening to
Mixtape, your favorite Afro-Latin podcast.
What She Said.
Today's track title is inspired by the song Picoteando por ahí, Pecking Around, by Henry Fiol.
Picoteando por ahí, y me defiendo. Picoteando por ahí, yo me la busco. Picoteando por ahí, y me defiendo. Picoteando por ahí. Yo soy latino
Today we're listening to Timbalaye by Los Hacheros. Hello everyone. Melissa and I, Andres, we're going to be talking about a couple topics.
Yeah, we just wanted to get together and whatever you call this, I don't know.
A video podcast.
A video podcast.
Video series.
Podcast on what it's like to be Afro-Latino, Afro-Latina, and in the dancing. Andres and I are new to North Carolina, and so we've experienced some interesting things living in the South. When I joined our dance team, part of our bonding was talking about all the racially charged things that we experienced being here in the Triangle. So
I should say, I live way south, right? So I'm from Colombia.
Southern United States.
Southern United States. I guess we should start with what are we trying to go after with what we're trying to do. As Mel was explaining, we sort of started bonding on this sort of racial experiences that we've had in the southern U.S. And that kind of got us going, and especially in the last weeks, that a problem that's been happening for centuries has gotten more attention because now we're recording it, and it got us thinking. Okay, we as Afro-Latinos, as dancers, as people that sort of enjoy dancing, which is as most of us know, at least for salsa, it comes from Afro-Latin rhythms. So we wanted to see, okay, what can we do? What can we say? What can we use our voices for?
And we're always talking about this.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we tend to have these conversations, and we think, well, wouldn't it be cool if other people can have these conversations too? And
exactly, and especially I think Melissa and I have been talking about this. We've had some conversations, plenty of conversations with myself at the Department of Economics. So we'll get into what each of us do at work, at school, with friends, with family. So, but then again, so the main objective that we're trying to go after is, on the one hand, to give experiences from what we've had, but also sort of think of where salsa is today, at least for this is us as salsa dancers, where social dancing or dancing in general we think it stands today, and sort of steps moving forward that could help other people to start thinking about, okay, so what things we should be thinking of in order for the environment to become an anti-racist environment. I guess we both want to be really clear about that. The main objective, I think, or from my side, you can jump in the list as well, but from my side is very clearly, what can we do to make this environment less racist or more anti-racist?
Yeah.
And then, of course, this is embedded into social dancing and whatnot, but that's kind of what we're trying to go after.
Right. And dancing is one of the most inclusive things that you can do. And it's great that it's inclusive, but one part about dancing is that it can be easy to be superficial.
Yeah.
Because what do you have in common? Just dance, right? So I think this is a good opportunity to dig a little deeper and kind of explore what we don't get to explore in the dancing.
We're also going to present ourselves to say, where we're coming from, what do we do, and all of those things, so that you recognize sort of at least where we're coming from. and then we'll take it from there as we move forward.
Yeah, we want to give a little context.
Yeah.
And everybody thinks differently and has different experiences. And I think with us giving some context about who we are, you can kind of get a frame of why we think perhaps the way that we think about things and how we've come to these conclusions.
Exactly. So think of this as the introduction, context of who we are. Why should you care about whatever it is that we have to say? And then we'll move into other topics as we go along, kind of developing the same idea. So yeah, why don't we start? What is our first topic?
So the first topic is, where are we from?
Okay. Okay. Disclaimer. I'm not a native speaker, so if I make mistakes with my English, you have to forgive those.
Well, I'm a native speaker, so if I make mistakes, just please.
You can't forget that. Then
no judgment.
Yeah, no judgment. Okay, so you want to go ahead first?
I'll go first. Okay. So what's cool is I'm New Yorican, and if you don't know what New Yorican means, it means you're a New Yorker who is also Puerto Rican. And I grew up New Yorican, so I was not born in Puerto Rico. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. But both of my parents are Puerto Rican. My mom is one of 12 kids, and my dad is one of 5. He was born here, but my mom moved here when she was about 3 years old. Her and like 8 of her siblings. Her and 11 of her siblings. My grandpa came first and kind of situated the family. He came, and the oldest daughter was here with him, and then everybody came up. And what's cool about living in North Carolina is I have an aunt that lives here and who's older than my mom, so she remembers living in Puerto Rico. And so I asked her a ton of questions. So yeah, so I get to talk to her a lot about what it was like living in Puerto Rico and coming here. And I've learned a lot about my family through talking to her. But they moved to New York, to Brooklyn, New York, and nobody spoke English. And so they had to learn English on the block, talking to their friends and whoever they met. But from what I've learned is around the time that they were growing up, there was a push to speak English. And so living in Brooklyn, New York, it was full of Dominican, Puerto Rican, Jamaican, Guyanese, Trinidadian, African American. So it was a nice Caribbean and African American mix.
Yeah, there were some Colombians there as well.
Probably, but so it was a Caribbean mix. And so when I was growing up, my parents didn't actually teach me Spanish, regrettably. So my parents speak Spanish, my grandparents speak Spanish, my grandparents only spoke Spanish, and I spent a lot of time with my grandparents.
We'll do the exact same video, but in Spanish, so you know.
No. So they spoke Spanish. I understood them, but there was no way I was speaking back to them. I mean, I went to a Spanish church. That I didn't know what they were talking about for sure. But anyway, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and around my Puerto Rican family of 30 cousins, living basically on the same block. And eventually an aunt of mine moved down to Tampa, Florida. And so when I was 12, I moved to Florida, and that's when I was first exposed to whiteness, I guess I would say. I had some school teachers who were white, but my understanding of teachers was that they were white, not that they were really anybody of color. So a teacher was white, and that was normal. But I moved to Florida, and everyone was white for the most part. And you'd have, classmates be like, say New York, say coffee. But I do think that that might have been one of the times that I first began to think of myself as trying to figure out who I am racially. So another thing about my large family is that we are a diverse range of color. So my grandmother was very, very fair skinned, and my grandfather was really, really dark skinned. And so, I'm a twin, and I have a twin sister, and she's very light, and I'm darker. And so we knew that there were different colors, but we thought that was just normal. So when I moved to Florida, we started doing things like going to the pool, right? And my mom would say things like, my mom and I have processed this. But we would go to the pool, and she'd be like, get out of the pool, you're gonna get black, you're gonna get too dark. And my defiant self was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get too dark. And I'd like stay in the sun even longer, or because I spent so much more time in the pool and started to like experiment with my curly hair. My mom would put relaxer in my hair to try and straighten it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would stand out in the rain and come home and be like, look, Mom, it's still curly. So my experience with race was I was trying my best to embrace my color and embrace my hair as an act of defiance, not so much as an act of pride. So moving along, I moved back to New York for college. And again, like I said, I'm a twin. So when I went to college, I went on my own. And that was very much a kind of learning to be my own person without my twin sister, who was like, that's how I made my friends, and that's how I did everything. So I moved to New York, and I was in an honors program at my college. And the honors program was predominantly made up of, at least my cohort was predominantly made up of white students. So that's when I started realizing that they had more access to resources. They had more access to books. They had more access to just general information. And I was an English major, so they were like, have you read this book? Have you read this book? And I'm thinking like, no, I haven't read that book. Like, so I started doubting myself in terms of like, man, do I belong in this honors program?
Yeah.
Is there something in my high school and elementary school, middle school that I didn't learn that should have prepared me for college? So moving along, I started kind of exploring who else was at the school, because although I loved my honors program cohort, something about them was just not fully connecting to who I was. So I started hanging out with the Black students, or the African American students, and I started hanging out at the Dominican table. They would joke around and make jokes in Spanish, and at the time, my Spanish was awful. It was like high school Spanish for a couple years, so yeah. It was like I knew what they were saying, but I didn't know how to joke in Spanish. Like it just wasn't. It was awkward. It was super awkward. So that is when I started to kind of question myself in terms of just like, well, am I Puerto Rican enough? I didn't feel like I questioned that too much in elementary school and middle school when I was in New York, because everybody was either Puerto Rican or Dominican or something, and we're all speaking English in school. And for my friends who spoke Spanish, like it didn't make me question who I was. Yeah. So it was like, okay, I'm in this honors program, but I'm too brown for all the white people in the program, and I'm sitting at the Dominican table, and I'm not Puerto Rican enough to actually engage with them. Even with my hair, I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll straighten it. And if I put it curly, it looks, no, that's not right. Straight's not right. So it was just kind of this identity crisis. Yeah. Who am I? But I did, in my last year of undergrad, I had a mentor who was also Puerto Rican, Wanda Velez, and I didn't like her at first. Someone recommended that I go meet with her, and I walked into her office, and I was like, how can you service me? And we spent some time getting to know each other, and she became a huge influence in my life, and we had a lot of conversations about identity and just who I was becoming, and through me processing who I was becoming as a woman, as a Puerto Rican woman, she would tell me, oh my goodness, I didn't even think about it that way, especially when we would talk about hair. Going on interviews. Is her hair
not as curly as yours?
Her hair is not as curly as mine, but I would talk to her about, like, when I was graduating, about going on interviews and straightening my hair, and I was like, no, I'm going to keep it curly because they're going to hire me with straight hair, and then I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back and be like, who is this person with curls? Like, you're the wrong person. So I figured, I just kind of give them what they're going to get from the beginning. So that college experience was really helpful. And I dated someone who was Dominican and who kind of refused to see me as Black or as racially as Black. He had a hard time kind of separating race and ethnicity. When you have these conversations about race and ethnicity and build on, like, you're Puerto Rican, but you don't kind of tap into what's happening racially and how you fit into the racial scope of things in the country, you know, as the more you shy away from it, you know, the less that you're going to understand. So I started to lean into it. And, you know, thankfully my brother sees himself as Pan-African, as part of the African diaspora. And so we've had lots of conversations about who we are. And I think part of the conversation might be a little easier because we're darker skinned. We're two of the darker skinned of me and my siblings. But we've talked about this so much that I think we have leaned on each other in our development and figuring out who we are racially, which is really important to us now. And I don't think we talk to anybody without talking about race and identity and ethnicity. It's just become part of our language. So yeah, that's my.
Yeah, so it's my story is slightly different, but it intersects quite a bit sometimes. Of course, I'm Latin American, as opposed to Latino. I think a lot of people don't make, not that it's a relevant difference necessarily, but it just means you were born in Latin America versus being from Latin American parents in the US. That's really what that means. So I was born and raised in Colombia, 23 years. I lived in Colombia, then I lived in Mexico for 2 years where I went for grad school. And my mom, I don't have as good a story of, like, I don't know my whole background back. I've never.
I asked lots of questions.
Yeah, no, I haven't asked as many questions, I think. I have, but there's some dark information that's not been shared in my family. My mom is, I don't know what I would say, like a whitish Latina. I mean, she looks pretty Latina, but she's definitely whiter than I am. My dad is mixed race. So he's a bit darker than me. I think his father was black and his mother was white, I think, Spanish of some sort. But again, I'm not a whole lot sure of how that story goes. Part of that is that I never met any of my grandparents. I think I only met my mom's mother. But I do know that my dad was mixed, and that I'm therefore also mixed, as I guess you can see. So that's sort of my parents or my family background, immediate family background. I have a sister as well. She's now, we used to be the same tone, but now I'm a little bit darker than she is, which is kind of strange. She has curlier hair than me. I got the less curly hair now. I mean, you can tell, I guess, but it's actually my hair when it grows it gets curlier, and it was definitely curlier before, and that's been a whole debate as well as to what makes people forget that I am also Afro-Latino. And yeah, so that's my background. I have 6 half siblings from my dad's side. They are less mixed than I am because my dad's first wife, I think, was an Afro-Latino woman. I don't know if she identifies herself like that, but that's what I would identify her as. So my brothers would be more identified as black as when people see me, at least in the States, right? So they would see my brothers and they would probably think of black men. People here see me and they don't know what to do with me. So that's my siblings. My mom has 6, 7 siblings, I think. Almost all of them sisters, and plenty of them in the US and in Canada. She's the only one that lives in Colombia, which is unfortunate because I live in the United States, but that's how it is. So I do have family from the States and born in the States. I have family that were illegals at some point as well. And I have family that just were born in the States, and I have family that came legally. I have all sorts of family when it comes to the US, and then I have married that also migrated here. So that's sort of my family background. And I'll talk about how I realized my race in a second. So my neighborhood, all of this is entangled to some extent. So I grew up until we were 10. My sister was 12 years old. Both of my parents work. So we were pretty much in the house, my sister and I, after school, which one, maybe 1 p.m. until whenever they got back from work.
Latchkey kids.
Yes. So it was just my sister and I for the longest time. So she was my best friend, and I don't know if I was her best friend. Probably not. But she hated me because I was too much. But yeah, so I didn't know like the concept of neighborhood and friends and all that until we moved to my parents separated, and then we moved with my mom to a different neighborhood. And in this neighborhood, being sort of introverted, shy person that I am, I saw the kids playing, but I was too shy to like go and play with them. And my mom would be like, "Go play with the kids," and I would play with a ball in the balcony of our little house there until somebody just invited me to play. This kid invited me to play. He's actually American born. Of Colombian parents, he invited me to play. Hey, you want to play soccer? And in Colombia, if they invite you to play soccer, you go play soccer, and then that's it. That's the bonding activity for your average men of teenage age. So that's kind of how I started sort of having that relationship with them, my neighborhood friends. That is, sort of quickly I realized I was the darkest of, and I'm not even that dark for what black is considered in the spectrum of blackness, I say, color-wise. But I was definitely the darkest of my friends in that neighborhood for a while. Not that I would think of them as white in the sense that white people, American people of white people, they were white relative to me. So none of them, I don't think any of them were mixed. So my nickname in the neighborhood then became Negro. So which is to today, that's my nickname in that neighborhood. My nickname is Negro, which means black. So for a while, that's how I saw myself. And they would, kids are kids. They do whatever they see their parents do and whatnot. So they would make fun of, if my nose was too big, if my ears were too big, if my lips were too big, if my color was too dark, all of those things were made fun of, kind of thing. So that's sort of part of how I started realizing, and that's why I'm saying my realization of my race and my neighborhood are very related, because a lot of it had to do with how my teenage friends saw me. They saw me as a black guy, and me sort of discovering what I was, kind of adopted that and was okay with it. It wasn't an easy ride by any means. In high school, it was an issue because as a mixed person, on the one hand, my neighborhood friends were seeing me as a black guy. In high school, they saw me as a combination of a sort of a black guy with an indigenous guy that has indigenous features and whatnot. So they would make fun of that part of me. And then, so back then, the Backstreet Boys were a thing. So I everybody was trying to get that haircut here, with straight hair and split in the middle kind of thing. So I, of course, jumped into that bandwagon and tried to straighten up my hair and grow it out. And it was a mess because it would, get all fluffy and stuff. So my friends with straight hair, of course, would make fun of that. And so that was kind of a fight of its own to come to terms with my own features, right? So with who I was. And again, also part of the sort of arriving, all of this is how I arrived to the realization of who I was my mom, right? So I don't think my dad ever sort of stressed being black at all, besides just him being black. And this goes back to what being black in Colombia has meant for many years. So there's so much mixture going that some people just kind of don't even stress it at all. And I think that's the story of my dad. One of my siblings, though, one of my brothers is very much into, knowing what your race is and whatnot, but my dad wasn't as much as that. So I never got any of that sort of racial pride from or acceptance from my dad. From my mom, it was more the ways in which she would treat me. When I was little, I was her little beautiful black kid, as she would call me in Spanish. Her mi negrito lindo. That would be my nickname that my mom had for me for the longest time. Which, if you ask me right now, I think it's beautiful that she would call me my beautiful black kid. And but it never sort of clicked in me in that sort of racial sense. It was just like this. It was descriptive. You know what I'm saying? I was like, yes, I'm black. I'm your kid, and I'm beautiful. So
makes sense.
It made total sense. But it was never a realization that, oh man, I'm black. I guess I'm black. It was just I accept the description because it kind of matches what I see as well. And then it was, it was sort of factual that I was black in Colombia. And then I moved, I guess, out of the country. So I'm going to skip my whole college story because there's not a whole lot of racial stuff. My nickname, although I should say my nickname in college was Tigre, which is tiger. I got that nickname because of a black soccer player that had earrings in both ears. And I used to have both earrings in both ears and play soccer. And I guess the third component is I was black. So that was my nickname. Even professors in class, they would forget my name and call me Tigre.
What?
Yes. So, and all versions of it: Tigre, Tigrillo, Tigrito, Tiger, Tiger, all of them.
Tiger.
Yeah. So I got all of the versions. I also got all of the versions of Negro, the good ones and the bad ones. So my American-born, and I say this because it's important to the topic, my American-born childhood friend would call me or would use a version of my nickname that I came to realize when I came to the US what it meant. He would call me nigger. So for all my childhood, that was the nickname that he sometimes would switch to. Sometimes he would call me negro, sometimes he would call me nigger. I thought it was just an English way of, I spoke zero English, okay? So I thought that was a way of translating. I never thought the translation was black. I didn't know this thing. So I thought it sounds kind of like negro. It sounds like the country of niggers, so I guess it makes sense. Once I got to the US, I realized that's not, and I'm not even sure he meant it in the ways in which I know now it's meant by an adult person. I'm pretty sure probably his parents, or the adults in his family were using that word to describe black people, and he just realized, oh, this is a word for black people, so my black friend, I'm gonna call him nigger.
Yeah, it's a bit too coincidental for him
exactly
to not have some context.
And this was a 12-year-old kid, so it would be very difficult for him to think through this issue, so he probably just adopted it from. So when I moved out of Colombia, where my race again was not as defined, or defined in some dimensions, but then not defined in others, I went to Mexico to do my grad school, or part of my grad school there. I was just a Colombian, another Colombian in Mexico. I have to say they treated me very well in Mexico, so I was just another person there. There's not a whole lot of Afro-Latinos in Mexico City, not that I could tell of. So I didn't necessarily relate with a whole lot of people on those grounds, and that part of my identity kind of, I use my I'm just Colombian identity, and I left the Afro-Latino identity while I was in Mexico. I feel like, which is part of being mixed. Like you can, it's not like you choose to do these things; just the environment sort of molds you into being certain part of your identity. Because again, I guess your look allows you to do those kinds of things or fit in certain types of ways. So after that, I came to the US for continuing for my grad school. And in the US, I think that's where I had my biggest crisis of identity, was coming to the US as a mixed race Afro-Latino. Because what I had thought throughout since childhood and whatnot was I'm a black man, I'm a black kid. That's it. So there's no, if anything, my indigenous native part, which is buried who knows when in my ancestry tree, was not as clear as my black heritage. Because my dad, I could see he was black. My mom, I could see she was kind of fair skin or sort of light skin Latina. I couldn't tell who was the indigenous part of it, but it came out. So it was harder for me to identify with that part of being native. So I came to the US, and then I'm just another Hispanic. If anything, I was like another Mexican. I got the Mexican plenty of times. Like, oh, are you from Mexico? Whatever. I said, well, I live there, but I'm not quite from Mexico, but I love the country, but I'm not from there. But then in the US again, I was just another Latino. And so my identity of being Black or being even anything, it just blurred completely. And it sort of started sort of growing back from the ashes of my own identity. I started sort of picking out the pieces and deciding, okay, you know, I am this. I've been this for many years. I'm not gonna let neither people who say you're not Black enough to tell me that I'm not Black enough, neither other people to say you're not Latino enough because you're dark or too dark or whatever. So I've been sort of rebuilding my sort of racial and ethnic identity in the U.S. for a while, and I think part of it is that the U.S. the racial tensions in the U.S. are a little bit more in the surface, as in there's so much underneath that it just bubbles up to the surface way more than it bubbles up in Colombia.
Flames are kind of a little higher in terms of
this. So the flames are very high. Not that they're not high in Colombia or in Latin America, it's just that here the tensions are so much higher because the division, there's not so much mixture, I would say, I would think. In Colombia, there's a lot of mixtures. A lot of us are mestizos to some extent, so some of us recognize our Afro heritage more than others. Whereas here, the mixtures are less. The region of the population that has been the product of mixtures, I think, is less. So people don't quite know what to do with us. With people that are not, you know, you look at them and you're like, I'm not sure where to put you.
Well, there's also like this, what kind of Latinos and Latinas are on the forefront of like the media, right? So you think of Puerto Ricans and you think of J-Lo, Mark Anthony.
The standard
but the
portrayal.
standard is light skin, certain kind of features, and so when people see me or when they would see me and my lovely question, what are you? Because apparently I can be so many other things. And nobody would guess Puerto Rican. They would think maybe Dominican. They would think West Indian. They would think anything but Puerto Rican. Ethiopian, which, I mean, one day I'll go to Ethiopia. I just try my best to blend in. But nobody would assume that I was Puerto Rican. And I think part of it is, you know, their assumption of what Puerto Rican is who are Puerto Ricans who get big jobs in music and entertainment. And they don't look like me.
And I think that's true across Latin America. So I would say my mom and my mom's side of the family is like that. So they're what you would think the average Latina looks like novelas kind of person, without, you know, it's not an offensive thing. It's just that's a portrayal that we get. So that's kind of my mom and her siblings are like the standard Latina looking, sort of straight hair, fair skin kind of thing. I'm not that. So my sister is not that because of our dad. So we got a little bit more color. My sister got way curlier hair and all that. So it is interesting to see that in Colombia. I didn't realize that. Like I just went through my head. Like I thought in Colombia I was just another Colombian. I somehow in my head, even with all of this discrimination stuff and racist stuff that I got from my childhood friends, and the words of affirmation and love from my mom, calling me, you know, my beautiful Black kid and all that. It never clicked that I was Black in that sense. It was just factual. I'm Black, and you're white. I'm Black. You're, you know, whatever.
Yeah. But everyone's still Colombian. And
but
like,
it was the Colombian blanket that was going across.
Yes, and that's what's I think cool about being Puerto Rican or Colombian or from like any country in Latin America is that there's so much pride about the culture of the country. Like, first of all, nobody wants to be called something that they're not.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh
so
my God.
like, don't call me Dominican. I'm Puerto Rican. Don't get it to, you know, lovely people, right?
Yeah.
But I'm Puerto Rican. Get it right.
Yeah.
And so there's just so much pride associated with that's kind of a connector. But there is still so much that recognizing color can do in someone's perception of who you are. But because of the cultural similarity, you feel like it doesn't exist. The color.
Yes, and
doesn't
I think
exist.
part of that recognition, when I start to kind of go underneath the Colombianity blanket and explore, okay, where do I stand in these racial things that I didn't know existed, or that I didn't realize existed, even though I had been exposed to all this discrimination myself. It was in the U.S. where I started seeing again all this, the flames and the tensions, and I did my grad school in WashU, so that's Ferguson for you. So all of that kind of helped. Former girlfriends of mine are Black women, talking with them about those issues and sort of how I saw myself as well. I think in one conversation with one of them, I was sort of relating sort of my childhood experiences and with racism and whatnot. That for me, sort of back then, I guess I thought of them as normal. Like, oh, I guess this is kids, you know, it's whatever. But then I was thinking again, I was like, I was the only kid. Yeah, I was like, I was the only kid that made fun for his features and whatnot, so consistently. And then I told them the story. I think I've told you the story of they put up a picture of a monkey in the neighborhood. They put it and they pasted on the houses around the neighborhood, and with the word "wanted" and my name, which, you know, it's a memory that I have very strong here still. And even with such an event happened to me, I still didn't click the racial tension. So I was relating this event to her, and she said, "Oh my God, I never had anything like that happen to me." And this is a Black woman, and she's saying to me, "You've experienced in that dimension
some extreme racism,
more extreme racism than even myself, who went to a white school." And so I was like, oh my God, this for me, something that for me was like, oh, I guess I just have to deal with this and then just move forward.
That's the interesting thing about living in the United States, that because race has been such an issue, or racism has been such an issue for so many hundreds of years, that it's kind of, I think, for people of color, for Black people specifically, or African American people, it's something that they had learned exists as a child, and then talk to their family about, and then their parents talk to them about how to deal with racism and how to deal with police, or how to deal with these kinds of experiences. And it sounds like you didn't kind of get that similar kind of coaching, because we don't talk about racism in Colombia.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I ever told my parents any of this. I'm sure my mom would have been, you know, crazy, and then she would have called the other mothers and whatnot. But for me, it was like, you know, I'm just the darkest kid. So I guess I don't know. I thought it was a feature thing. Maybe another guy is going to be too tall, and then we're going to make fun of him because he's too tall. But it didn't click to me that was the racism was what was happening and underlying all of those things. So that's sort of that realization has to summarize that story. It's sort of a two-stage process. A first process that was just factual, again, of me sort of my mom called me what she called me, my friends doing this sort of endearing things, calling me, because negro can be both an endearing and an offensive thing in Colombia, and I think in other Latin American countries as well. For the most part, I would think they use the negro as an endearing term towards me as my nickname, and I took it that way, and I think I felt it that way. Sometimes, of course, the word can be used in an offensive way, and it was used that way, but I don't think it was the majority. So that was that factual realization of, okay, so you're the Black kid in the block, in the neighborhood. That's, you know, that was who I was. From that being sort of blurred through my sort of traveling abroad and whatnot, and as I came to the US, sort of a new realization of who I was and how I was somehow put in this basket of Latinos, and you know, we don't even care what your race is, you're just another Latino, whatever that is. And me being like, no, I want to claim, I really want to claim what my race is and what my mixture is, and especially in a country like the US that needs, I feel like needs as Latinos at a minimum, recognize what it is that our heritage is, and what we can do to recognize it and to do a better service to it,
and cherish it.
Yes, and cherish it.
I feel like I think that's a privilege of having been able to leave home and go to school, has done, where it's in part, of course, to grow and learn and
Yeah.
your vocation or whatever, but it's also to grow and learn in yourself. And as you look back and make new friends and have these conversations, you realize like what was okay and what was not okay. And you know, had you not gotten out of your zone, right, out of your location,
Yeah.
and had these conversations with other
would've-
people, you would have been in the dark with
Yeah.
realizing how much that you had not only experienced, but even the way that you've internalized it, and how that has played out in other areas of your life unconsciously or
Yeah.
subconsciously. But now that you have had these conversations and you make yourself aware of what you've experienced, it's raised your consciousness so you can be aware of when that comes up in other contexts and how you're responding to it.
Yeah, it certainly has made me way more aware of it. It's an eye opener, I would think. Traveling abroad, which is you know, either direction. I think either a U.S. person going to Colombia or to Latin America coming here from another country, because you find this problem of racism and colorism and anti-blackness in pretty much almost any country in the world. There's always some version of it happening. So being able to see it and to recognize it, I think I give a lot of value to it that I don't think I saw it as clearly when I lived in Colombia for the many years that I did. So I think from there, why don't we take it to the professional part? Because I think that's, at least for me, since I've moved here for work, that's where most of my experiences with Southern racism and things of that sort has happened. So you want to go ahead first, or should I continue?
I'll go first.
Okay. What do you do first?
What do I do? Yeah. So I'm a social worker. I went to NYU for undergrad, which is a very clinical program. And when I mean clinical, like really focused on therapy. And while I was at NYU, when you're getting your MSW, your Master's in Social Work, they require field placements.
What is a field placement?
A field placement is basically an internship. So they had me working for free.
Nice.
So I learned a lot there. My first internship was in Elmhurst, Queens at a community development corporation through my church, actually. And Elmhurst, Queens is considered the most diverse zip code in the world. Elmhurst, Queens is also where the epicenter of the pandemic was.
The COVID
pandemic. So anyway, I worked as a social work intern there, and that is actually what got me into immigration. So because it's so diverse, there's a lot of undocumented immigrants there, and so at the health center, I would sit at my social work office, and people would come in who were undocumented, and I mean, be suffering with like illness and knowing they can't go back to their country or not having the finances to take care of themselves. So what I would do was really look for resources to help them get connected to medical care, and then also just talk to them about how to manage their feelings and their stressors, connect them with people, connect them to the food pantry. So my second year, I ended up merging my internship with my full-time job. And there I worked with youth in the neighborhood that I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. Young adults, actually. So like 18 to 24, which I think I was like 25. Like I was like, they're learning from me and I don't know what I'm doing either. But so I would do therapy with them, whoever volunteered to do therapy. And I would also hold groups about vocational training, and they would get their own job internships, and then we'd try and help them with jobs and so on and so forth. I graduated from NYU. And once I graduated, I started to work part-time as a researcher at NYU with youth and young adults in community settings, doing community research, and also research on a mental health intervention in the city. And full-time, I worked as a therapist at a foster care agency. So what I really got interested in when I was working in the foster care agency was helping or working with foster care youth to figure out who they were and who they wanted to be. So unfortunately, when you're in foster care, at least the youth that I was working with, all of them had a diagnosis, usually like mood disorder or PTSD, and that being a product of trauma and abuse moving from house to house. And they were all at ages where they were going to age out of foster care. So meaning when they hit a certain age, they were out to fend for themselves. So one thing I loved talking to them about was their transition into adulthood and what it meant to make adult decisions and how those decisions reflect who you are and who you want to be, on top of like unpacking trauma and all of that stuff. I was encouraged to get my PhD by my boss at my research job, and I decided to work full-time in research to see if that's something that I would actually enjoy, because research is fun, but it's kind of independent and lonely. And I still did therapy part-time when I was doing research full-time. But around the same time that I started working part-time in research, I joined the dance community. And joining the dance community gave me an opportunity to kind of figure out who I am and who I wanted to be in a brand new setting. So all those settings that I've been able to do that with has been in school and in my undergrad. People knew my brothers, so like I was myself, but I was also Rick and Jay's little sister. And in my master's, I don't think I was working so much, I didn't even get to build community in my master's program.
Me in my master's.
Yeah, I just went to class and left. I think I made 2 friends. That was it. And both of them, we were just like in the same class, and we were also like, one was she's Dominican, and the other one is Indian. And we were like, okay, cool, we're people of color. We're in the same class at school. So long story short, I got into the dance community and I started to develop friendships with people in a non-academic setting. And they started calling me the doc because I was doing therapy. So everybody would come to me and ask me questions, and, you know, I would practice my skills on them. And, you know, I would charge them with like drinks when we go out. And
you don't even drink.
I know. And that was the joke. I was like, you're buying me a drink. And they're like, no, you don't even. Like, so, but no, I built like really great friendships with them, and through dance, it helped me kind of boost my own confidence of who I am as a woman, as, you know, someone who has a hobby. Like when I joined the dance team, my whole family was like, a dance team? Like, what is this? You don't even dance. Like, you do sports. So that was weird. And I guess even just being Puerto Rican, like you just social dance. Like you don't go to class.
Yeah, that's the Latino thing.
Yeah,
you don't
like,
do
what
that.
Is that. So I say that because being in the dance community, I soon learned that community is really important. As big as my family is, we grew up where you don't need friends if you have family. And so I didn't make it a priority to make friends outside of, you know, that, or at least have close friends. So it did help me begin to lean on community, because at the time I was living in the Bronx, and here I am in the Bronx, not Brooklyn, which I ended up loving. And
shout out to the Bronx.
Yeah, but I just had to navigate that on my own, and again, decide who I wanted to become and what people were going to see me as, and make adult decisions about how I allow people to treat me and how I want to treat people. And so I got so interested in the community and identity. It happens to be what I am interested in researching now as a social worker at UNC. So I made my way here, and now I'm a full-time doc student. Rising third year.
Does that mean, I always get that messed up? So that means
I have 2 years in, and I'm going into my third year.
Okay.
Yes, rising third year. That's a word they use here.
Yeah. No,
someone said rising second year, and I was like, what is that? What does that mean?
I don't. Okay.
I'm a rising third year. So here I am now doing my research thing, and this is why this conversation is fun for me, because I am so into identity and community, and as we talk about dance, you'll see me light up about this conversation.
Okay, so let me relate my profession. All right, so what do I do? I got a degree in industrial engineering in la Universidad Tecnológica de Pereira. Shout out. So that's where I did my undergrad in industrial engineering. I worked for 2 years in a transportation company. The first year was running shift, which means you work seven days during the day, 7 days in the afternoon, and 7 days at night. So that's the only time I work at night, and it was awful. I mad respect for those who work at night, man. That's insane. Like I was a zombie. I can tell. That's a whole other conversation. I was a zombie that first year. I would not do that ever again in my life. Anyway, so I did that my first year. The second year, I got I guess I could call it a title promotion, in the sense that there was not a wage premium to that promotion. I just didn't have to work at night anymore, which was great. And do more technical things that I'm more sort of comfortable with. So that was my second year. But then I've been always very interested on two things. On the one hand, sort of mathematics. I just kind of like the mathematic way of thinking, being precise and those kinds of things. Not that you can't be precise with words. It's just that with math, I feel like the math prevents you from not being precise. Because otherwise, it's very easy to see that you're wrong. In words, you can always, expand the meaning.
Flexibility.
You get a little flexibility that you don't get as much in mathematics. So that's kind of, I think, why I really liked engineering. But I also was a lot into, I was part of, I guess I skipped that whole part of me. I was part of the several students' movements, as we call them in Latin America, movimientos estudiantiles. I started there I think in my first year of grad school, or my last year of high school, of college, or my last year of high school. I can't remember which one of the two. So that opened my eyes to a lot of things, but at the same time, it sort of gave me a different way of thinking about issues from sort of a class perspective, I would think. So that part of me was always sort of interested still in sort of social issues and how those interact in society and whatnot. But then I had sort of this mathematical side of me, sort of interested in writing math and like doing math. And so I realized that for me, the best kind of mix of both worlds was do economics. And to be honest, I wanted to do economics like from the get-go. It's just that in Colombia, at least in Pereira back then, an industrial engineer could take the job of an economist, and an economist could not take the job of an industrial engineer. So one kills the other one.
It's like that with social work and psychology.
Yeah. So
social work is a lot more broad.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was like, okay, I can take their job, so I might as well do engineering. But after 2 years of work, I was like, no, I felt like I really want to do economics. So I got a scholarship. I told you that story. We can talk about that later, about how I got the scholarship and how all that happened. I got a scholarship to do a master full-time economics in Mexico. So I went there. I took it. It wasn't hard a decision because my stipend was higher than my salary. So it was a done deal. It was a done deal. Yeah, as an engineer, I was making very little money. Unfortunately, part of it was that I was very anxious when I came out of college. So I took the first job that they offered me, and it was not the best. My dad did not like this, but I wanted money. I wanted to not be dependent on my parents anymore. Very quickly. That was a mistake. Don't do that, kids. Anyway, so I was in Mexico. I did a master's in economics there. Being there, one of my sort of master dissertation advisors told me, hey, have you thought about doing a PhD? Which I hadn't. It wasn't even in my plans. So my plans were I go to Mexico, I do this master's, I come back, get a good job, get some money, get established, whatever. That was not what happened. I realized that I actually liked it wasn't a surprise, even I think now that I think back, it wasn't a surprise that I liked research and like going after ideas and whatnot. But the idea of doing a PhD, I didn't know what a PhD was until like they mentioned it, and I started seeing these research papers and reading research papers. I was like, oh my God, this is an actual thing. Like you just go forward in your education. So I said, yeah, maybe I would do. So there was this scholarship at Yale. Right as the master's that you could apply to. So I did apply to that. I ended up getting that as well. So I spent a year at Yale. While being there is when I applied to grad school. Then I was entirely convinced that, yeah, this is definitely what I wanted to do. So I applied to econ schools. I got in a couple of them. I ended up going to WashU in St. Louis, Missouri. This is where, you know, I ended up being exposed to the racial conflicts that happened through Ferguson and all that as well. I have to say, being there, except for, you know, Ferguson was exposure enough, I would think, and I got myself in a couple of marches there. But besides that, I don't think I had been exposed to racial issues within academia that much. And part of it is that until I got to the US, and until fairly recently, I think, this is North Carolina. So after I finished my PhD in 2017, I got a job at UNC. So now I work at the econ department at UNC, and I'm tenure track there. I think I'm the only research faculty that's Latino. Yes, I'm the only research faculty that's Latino in the econ department.
Welcome to the South.
Yes.
Or I don't know.
Welcome to economics. No, there's a lot of, but I should say there's a lot of Latin Americans, mostly from Argentina and Chile sometimes, in Mexico. But it's not Latinos, it's Latin Americans, and that's why I was making the difference. In academia, it matters a lot. So a lot of us don't have the same experience that I do. So, you know, we low income type of people, got scholarships, whatever. Plenty of us is just people that had a lot of money, went to private school, went to the best universities. In Colombia, that would be went through Andes in Bogota, got the best education. They have the hookups in the best universities in the US. Then you got to the PhD program. That's not my stories. I have no hookups in Andes. Shout out to Andes. I know nobody there. Every time somebody would meet me here from econ academia, it would be like, "Oh, so you're from Andes?" And I was like, "No, nope. I graduated from my state university. I did not go through Andes. I know nobody in economics in Colombia. Now I know a couple of people, but you know, that was not my path." But the reason why I'm saying this is because there's this thing that, or there's the thing that I want to stress is that hiring Latin Americans is not the same as hiring Latinos. Hiring Afro-Latinos is not the same as hiring Black men and women from the US. That's a distinction that, at least from at least in academia, I don't know what professions, but at least in academia, they're not the same object, because we're exposed to different things, right? So again, my experience, maybe it's more similar to the experience of a Black person in the US because I was low income and whatnot. But my dad had college education, which again, a lot of people, Latinos also, their parents have college education. But so in that sense, my experience was more similar. But the experience of a lot of Latin Americans coming here and getting degrees and getting professorships and whatnot is not the same. So when you think of departments and diversity, and you say, oh, okay, we have this Latino, that Latino, sometimes they just mean Latin Americans that had a lot of money. And that went through that process. Like I know a couple. I don't dislike them. It's just that's what it is. That is different. So that's something that I feel like has to be recognized. That a lot of us coming here, especially the ones that come to academia, have been privileged in our backgrounds. I don't think I have myself a whole lot. I've been very lucky, and I think I recognize my privilege as well. But I would also recognize that a lot of us just had it a little bit relative to the other people in our own countries. We had a good deal, and that's something that needs to be sort of recognized. Sort of not to use Latin Americans of upper middle income upbringing to claim that your departments and your workplaces are diverse, because yes, you're getting Latinos, right, but class-wise, yes, exactly, yeah. and that's I think that's very important also to recognize. So I got a job here, and then I started realizing the racial things. So let's get into experiences. So we're in, and I guess I missed the whole theme of our talk. How this relates to salsa. So I started dancing in grad school, kind of like you. I started dancing in my first year of grad school in St. Louis. Well, to be fair, I started dancing when I was 5 years old. One of my aunts used to be a choreographer, so she made us a choreography when we were kids, and my mom taught me how to dance salsa, the Colombian, not the Cali way, the Colombian way. Colombia style is a whole different thing. I didn't know how to do that back then.
There's so many different styles.
Yes.
My parents dance Puerto Rican style.
Yeah,
They don't even call it on one. It's just like I learned on two, and my dad was like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah, exactly. So I knew the Colombian way through my mom. There was a lot of that. I mean, being a teenager in Colombia, I think it still does, but back then, man, you dance salsa, you dance merengue.
Mhm.
That's what that means. Every single party with your friends was a party to dance, which I don't know how kids do that here. Like for me, a party without dancing is the craziest thing ever.
It's boring.
It is boring. Like that's a whole other conversation. Anyway, so it was cultural for me. It was cultural for me dancing, but then I shut it down for a while. I did not do any of that in Mexico, for instance. When I was in New Haven, I think I did it once or twice when they would play music and I would get excited. And then at grad school, the first year, as you know, as a PhD student, the first year is tough. It's a lot of adjustment, and you don't really have a lot of time to build a network of support. You just have to go. You have to do. There's so many subjects. There's so much information, and you have to perform. You have to get the grades.
It's the pressure of doing all those things plus moving to a new place. So you went from New Haven to Missouri.
Yeah.
I came from New York down here to Chapel Hill, and not being white in a PhD program, and not to say all white people in PhD programs know other PhDs and have a sense of how to navigate this space. But I think we talked about this before.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know anybody in my life in my personal life who have received a PhD. And so it was just kind of figuring it out as I go.
Are you first in family?
Yeah.
Hey, shout out.
Oh yeah, like master's was just like, woo, I made it, right? Because I have a master's, my brothers and a couple other cousins have masters, but PhD, like, it's moving to a new place, meeting the demands of the program and learning methods and all this, and also doing it and being a minority.
Yeah, no, you said that again. I as a Latin American, it's sometimes you just perceive these things as factual. Which is why I value so much be gaining so much awareness in the US. Unfortunately, I wish it was a more positive awareness, but it is what it is. I was the only Latino in my year in the PhD. We were 20.
What?
Yeah.
You see?
I was the only. I was Latino gang, but I was the only one. Yeah, I was the only one, the only Spanish speaking as well. I don't think I used my Spanish in grad school because I was the only. I mean, there were some Latinos in years above and I think below as well. But in my
your cohort,
it was me, and that was it. Kind of looking back, it's kind of interesting. And again, I'm not Latino per se. I'm Latin American, so I was coming from a different country to study here. So if you think of Latinos as the one born in the U.S., there were zero. And the ones I'm mentioning were also not born in the U.S. All the Latinos that I met in the program were either born in Argentina, come here for school, born in Mexico, came here for school. Yeah. None of them were people of Latin American descent born in the U.S. None of them, zero.
Yeah. And I think that's pretty normal in that, and also just being Puerto Rican, I think we kind of we're very different from a lot of other Latin American countries because we have a relationship with the U.S., right? And so who needs a passport to go to Puerto Rico? Nobody, right? So it's like, yes, I'm U.S. born, but even if I wasn't U.S. born, like even if I was born in Puerto Rico, I would still, kind of have a lot of advantages as a citizen in America. But I'm the only Latina. In my cohort, there's only 3 of us, and I'm the only Latina, but also I am, when I walked into my program on my first day of stats camp, my other 2 classmates, one is mixed race, Black and white, and the other one is Black African American. So I was kind of excited to walk into the program and be like, woo, we're all the same complexion, and so we kind of feel each other out in that we're coming from the same place kind of racially, and here we are now.
Yeah. So to take it back to my how I got into dancing. So that was my first year, WashU. again, I had forgotten, or not forgotten, but sort of not used that part of my, again, as a mixed race person and as an international person, you have this, I don't know if it's an ability or just your instinct for almost survival to just fit in. You pick and choose which parts of your culture you want to highlight so that you are kind of, you fit best.
It's code switching.
Yes,
a little bit.
it is a little bit of code switching, honestly. So I had led my dancing on the side, and the first year of the PhD was so tough that I thought I really need something that is gonna get me out, because I was not getting out of the house. I was studying like a whole day, work, and anybody that knows me out there knows that I'm a little bit of a workaholic, that I've been trying to not be, but I am still a little bit. So I wanted to introduce something that would be consistent enough as a hobby that I could take seriously, and that could just kind of take space from my all being working all the time kind of thing, and of course something that would make me feel comfortable. And of course dancing was, since it's part of my culture, the music, like I know many songs, so almost any song that everybody plays, I would know the lyrics, where it stops, where it continues, so it was very easy for me to embrace kind of the salsa culture here. And to be honest, as an academic, the idea of taking classes, as opposed to like we've probably all heard from our Latino friends or something, that somebody at some point would say, "Why are you taking classes?
You're Puerto Rican. Why are you taking classes?
Exactly.
You know how to dance."
But
not like this.
Exactly. So I went to this social. So my former instructor invited me to this social. And I was like, "Of course, I'm Colombian. I know how to dance." So I go to this social, and I dance. I'm on beat and whatever beat that is, but I'm on tempo. And I sit down. She was very nice. She's a wonderful dancer. Now she does ballroom. Lauren Wilmore, shout out. And she was nice. So she made me feel like I was, the best dancer on the floor. And I sat
wait till she see what I got.
And I sat down to just see one song and see how people were dancing, and I was blown away. The technique, the turns, the body movement, like the complexities, and I just fell in love with it. Like as a sort of an academic, as somebody that does research, just the complexities of the things just got me excited. So
you were embarrassed?
I was no.
I went. My first exposure to like a social dance.
I'm Colombian. We don't get there.
I went to a social in DC. Okay, and I went with a group of friends, Dominican friends, and so we're like, we're gonna go to this spot, and we're gonna show them how to dance. When I tell you these folks were dancing, I mean like the way we are now on social, and we were like, we got to get out of here before they figure out that we don't dance as well as they do.
No. So I did not get embarrassed, but I did not dance anymore that night.
You just call it something else.
I just sat down and watched. And
mesmerized.
I was mesmerized. And then my friend Sean, who now lives in New York, a wonderful dancer as well, was there. And when they two danced together, I was like, oh my God, why don't I know how to do these things? I have to know. I have to learn these things. So I went full systematic kind of PhD student into salsa, and then I took it seriously, and I kept taking the classes and whatnot, and it did the job that I wanted it to do, and way more than what I wanted out of it. So it definitely took that sort of time off my at all times working person. So it definitely helped me find that balance. And at the same time, it helped me build community, which is something that you were mentioning as well. That was lacking in the PhD a little bit for me.
And similarly, we've talked about this before. I think for me, I became a better student when I had
for sure.
time to invest in my happiness and building a community. So it's like you become a better student, you become a better dancer, and you build community.
And then, so when I graduated, I was a little bit worried. I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit worried that part of me would just go away. Because I was thinking, okay, I'm tenure track, now I have to work all the time, do research, that. So I came to UNC, but then I decided from the very beginning, I said, this depends only on me. If I'm gonna let it die, it's gonna be on me. And I said, I'm not gonna let it die. It served me very well when it comes to balancing community, and I'm gonna keep doing it. And here I am. I'm still doing it. But yeah, as we go into this experiences thing, so I was sheltered in grad school, I think, by my advisors. Shout out to George Levigill and Bart Hamilton. Because I never had those experiences, those sort of racial things, those racial undertones, those suggestions of inferiority towards me or anything like that. And again, even if I take it all the way back to being in Colombia, being Black was factual to me. But and I tell my friends this thing that the first time I ever felt someone say something about me, either racially or from an ethnic point of view, that made me think that, oh my God, they think they're superior to me, like in some sort of weird racial or ethnic way, was in the US. Because in Colombia, like I was top of the class all the time. I never felt inferior to anyone. If anything, my mom would let me know that I was like, I had this superiority complex that I was too smart for everyone else. So it never was like, oh my God, this is Black, this is white friend, he's superior to me in some sort of way. No, I never had. Again, if anything, I was always like, oh my God, what are these guys doing with their lives, kind of thing. But here it was completely different. Here, I did feel that when I was hired, and this is because I am what the UNC calls a diversity hire. So they're trying to go after people like me, or women of color, or men of color, or that kind of sort of minority. So they hired me through this channel. And as I was talking to another person of color academic the other day, that on its own, it's sort of a conflicting thing for us. And
can I exist in this space without being a minority hire
or
a minority recruit?
Yes, exactly. And so and it's
without
conflicting.
Ticking off one of your boxes.
It's conflicting for the following two things. So on the one hand, I'm all for this policy because I think if you see a research project of quality from a person of color, from a Black man, from a Black woman, in a research project, same quality from a white man or a white woman, for me, and this is for me, I don't know for you, and so this is a claim only for Andres. This project here, if I was to invest in the project, I would invest in the project that the Black man or the Black woman had. The reason for that, it has nothing to do with race. The reason for that has to do with these two people have gone through so much shit in their lives. So much. It's like not even a comparison that it could be fair enough to compare with these two people. And they still made it to this level of quality. They must be, I have to invest. Like this is where the potential is. So as an investor, that's what I would see. I would like, you made it all this way? Oh my God. And it's not, again, it's not me saying every person of color that needs to get into academia has to be this level, because most of us are not exceptional. That's not the word. That's why exceptional makes no sense. Because you can't expect everybody to be LeBron James. You can't expect every Black man to be LeBron James. That's impossible, right? So we have to, that's the sense in which we have to change the system so that it doesn't take a whole LeBron James for a Black man to be successful. But again, so that's the sense in which those would be the people that are like, oh my God, you have to be really freaking good if you made it to this level. So in that sense, I'm like, okay, we do need to target them. And if we have to make a more holistic way of evaluating them to take into account the fact that they went through so much and still got that level of quality, then we better do it. So I'm okay, not even okay, I'm very much in favor of these types of policies. And at the same time, as being the recipient of the policy, I'm like, oh my God, does that mean that I'm sort of low level of quality relative to... Are you
doing me a favor?
Yes, am I some sort of favor that you're doing? And I don't really deserve it. It's just like, you kind of made a...
I felt similarly so I'm not a diversity hire, but my cohort of color, full cohort of color, which is just a shock, right? Came in after a open letter to the school about their lack of diversity in their PhD program. And so how did they address that? They hired everyone, or they recruited everyone of color. So it was kind of a drastic move. And so me and my classmates talk about this all the time. Do we deserve to be here? Absolutely. But the way we came in was kind of like weird.
Yeah.
So
it's like it's great, but it makes you feel strange about it.
Yeah. So there's also this added pressure where it's just like, okay, we as a cohort have to prove that they didn't F up. Like they didn't make a mistake taking us in, but at the same time, it's like what ends up happening is we work 10 times harder to impress or try to make sure that they didn't make a mistake. So we work 10 times harder, and then we stress ourselves out, and just put on so many expectations that nobody's really asking for. But
well, I don't know if they're asking for it, and that's a whole. They might. they might. I don't know. It's the same thing. So that the good part is we have to recognize that they've gone through so much. So if we see them at this level, or even a slightly lower level, they're still superior from an investment into human capital point of view, as we call it in economics. But then there's that sort of there's a little tag that got put in the
existential product. Psychological warfare.
You're like, but then I'm like, you figure a little bit because I'm a diversity. I'm not like higher in my case. Yeah. So I do also feel like that need to just like show them that it was not. It's not only to them but to the world. Like it's not. See my papers, like it was not like there's no sense of low quality or like I'm not trying to do something shitty or anything like that. Like it's quality what I want to produce, but I definitely put that extra pressure in for sure. I'm always thinking, are they gonna think of this finished product I'm presenting? This is the diversity hire. This is what his. And of course they've let me know that that's not the case and whatnot, but. The name is there, right? So the name was there. It's not that to be fair to them, they haven't stressed it, but I know that's the way in which they hire me, and that's going to be with me.
I don't know if you've experienced this in terms of like looking for grant funding, but what I'm finding is as a PhD student, I get a lot of the emails about minority funding for fellowships for people of color, fellowships, right? And I'm like, okay, if I were not a minority, what fellowships would I be getting? Because I'm not getting emails for those. So I'm like, am I not good enough to get those other ones that are floating around that you're not forwarding to me? Or?
So again, so all of these things are sort of things that have sort of started or made this conversation stronger for us. For me, the need for more conversation had already sort of been bubbling up, and then we have George Floyd. And before that, all the things that happened before with Ahmad, and then we have Brianna, and then we have Mike Brown from Ferguson. So it's been going, but the wave that we got now with the last things that have happened, or the last things that have gotten coverage, I should say, sort of made this feel a little bit more urgent. And that's the sense or the reason why I think we're finally sort of pull the trigger and say, okay, I feel like we need to use our voice in not only as Afro-Latinos, but as Afro-Latinos in the Dutch community and Afro-Latinos that in the Dutch community that have some sort of experiences in also other communities such as academia. And I think it's we have sort of very interesting perspectives from your New Yorker sort of point of view, and also from my point of view as a Latin American of mixed race, as an Afro-Latino from Colombia that has traveled and has experienced these two different ways of seeing race that I feel like some people don't get in the U.S. Even some mixed race people in the U.S. don't get. I actually never gotten a black person that doesn't get it, but sometimes I get mixed race people that just don't understand the differences and the nuances of experiences when you're Latin American versus when you're a mixed race person in the U.S. versus if you travel. There's all sort of things that are slightly different that it's worth sort of understanding, I think, and it's useful.
Yeah, I think why it's important that we kind of situated our stories into this is kind of twofold, so that folks can understand where we're coming from and our different perspectives, but also I think as an invitation for whoever is listening to start to begin thinking about their story and their narrative, and how they began to realize how they were racialized. Maybe even go back to think about some of the unkind things that happened to them, how that's impacted who they are now, whatever background that people are in, you know, whether you're white or black or Asian or, you know, Latino, wherever you come from. It does not hurt to take a step back, think about your story, think about your narrative, think about where you fit in this context, where you are now, and how you got there. So I think what we hope to get out of this is two things. For people, like I said, to start thinking deeply about who we are as individuals, as community members, as neighbors, as dance partners, as team members, thinking about who we are and how we fit, and then thinking about how it intersects with the things that we do, whether that's academics, whatever your vocation is, and then what we'll be talking about specifically with dance, whether that's social dancing or being on a team, a performance team, or being a professional dancer, which we are not. So I think a good takeaway and a good goal: who are we, and how does that intersect with where we are?
Yes, where we see these conversations that we're having going. It's precisely those things that Mel was mentioning. So we want to think about these issues in a way that goes beyond the surface. And that's why, you know, there's two ways of doing that. Again, this is the academic and me coming out. You either do a case study, which is what we're doing right now, and we are the subjects of this case study, or you study the literature seriously and then present it accordingly, right? So neither of us, I think, it's an expert when it comes to race and dance. We just sort of experience it through our own being in that community. So that's what we will be talking about. So you can see us as a case study. This is definitely not a generalization of how dance and race is or should be. We'll begin our opinions, and in that sense, again, you can think of us as a case study of two Afro-Latinos in a dance community. But I think that doesn't take any of the value that we have, that we can bring, because I think our experiences, and especially as academics, we can systematize things and sort of give them a little bit of shape. It's fairly important. So I think what we will be bringing in the future, if you keep
coming with the heat,
if you keep coming, we're coming with the heat for sure. If you manage to make it all the way, listen to us all the way here, thank you very much. And we'll see you in the next one.